Hello, everyone. Welcome to Street Yans Podcast. It's your boy, Adeboy, as usual. And today we'll be talking about what I'll call an international issue, something that has come to our mind basically because of the coups that have been happening in Africa recently. A lot of the time, we always wonder if governance it's all about maybe democracy versus military rule and the likes. But today we are looking at it from a different angle because I like to believe that the absence of military rule does not necessarily mean that uh, whatever government or political system that exists in that such a country simply means democracy. And today we're going to be examining these facts and looking at it from the African perspective, of course, in terms of a lot of the countries, even countries that have not experienced any military coup recently. And also look at why there's so much risk of military coup springing up in countries in Africa. And so joining me today is Dayo Lamide and Afis Dunuga Agasoka. Guys, when I was thinking about this whole topic, one of the major things that I thought about is okay, we want to talk about civilian rule, representative representation of the people, democracy, and all these things. We talk about it in the same vein, like it all means the same thing, as long as whoever is in power is not wearing khaki or uniform. Probably we get comfortable. Recently, there were a lot of coups, and there was a coup in Niger, there was a coup elsewhere, and there was a lot of this African leaders came up to stand, say, no, we are going to stand against the coup, especially the one in Niger. There was a lot of outcry where they were like, no, we have to return back to democracy, bring democracy back. We must bring take back, give power back to the. And I remember on this podcast, one of the things we highlighted was that even the guy that was removed from office has been in power in one form or the other for so long. That longevity in power, how these African leaders have been able to hold on to power for so long, even within the context of democracy, is one of the things I want us to look at because I feel like it is one of the major things that is opening the door for military rule. I think, from your own opinion, exactly at what point do we say this is still democracy, even within the context of civil rule?
Well, let me start with well, let me start with democracy being the government of the people. And when they say of the people, it means the people can choose who their leaders are. They can come out to say, okay, we want to expunge this leader through maybe the House of Rep or the National Assembly in whatever country, or even if they have it in their constitution through what do they call that thing in the constitution where you have to get opinion polls from the populace. I think one country has it, one West African country. So democracy, if you are still voting, you are still going to the ballots to choose your leaders, then we would consider that democracy. However, it is just so sad that the version of democracy we have in Africa is different from the version of by the people who brought it to us. That is the Western world. So, in as much as people are still going to the ballots and people are still uh, people are still choosing their leaders, then it's still democracy. However, however, the caveat is that the is now different. Yes, totalitarianism democracy. Yes, yes, aristocratic democracy. Yeah, and that is because we are in Africa. The funny thing now is the people who, or let me say, the countries or the governments, that is this Western world that introduced this, the ones that are not the kind of democracies that are not subservient to them, they tend to name shame it or not bless it. That is to say, they will say this is not the kind of government you should be running, blah blah blah. However, the ones that are okay with them, or the ones that, in as much as you continue ruling, or it's not their problem. And we have the examples all over us:
Africa.
Cameroon, Togo, Benin. Sad truth is, in as much as you are still going to vote, the president is still amending the constitution for him to be able to run for more term. Is still them.
The perspective you brought in now basically speaks to, okay, let's say the principles of democracy itself, or representation of the people, citizenship, participation, equality, political tolerance, accountability, transparency, regular, free and fair elections, economic freedom, control of abuse of power, rights of citizens, accepting the result of elections, human rights, multi-party system, rule of law. All these things are essential part of democracy. But the way I look at it is, it now comes down to how you interpret these elements.
Okay.
So, for instance, when you say control of the abuse of power, at what point can we now say that? Or can't we essentially say, just like you pointed out in terms of one president amending the constitution to favor himself, can we not consider that an abuse of power that essentially goes against one of the major principles of democracy?
Well, abuse of power, people should not see me as someone who has a tendency of abusing power in later in future. But the truth is, abuse of power happens almost everywhere in the world. It depends on how you go about abusing your own. Now, for example, in this part of the world, okay, everybody knows about Obasanjo's bid to run for it. There's no way Obasanjo would abuse that power, if he hadn't gotten the backup from the National Assembly. We heard rumors then, because this is not a fact, but it was rumor, but it was almost a fact that he gave 50 million each to both the upper chamber and the lower hand. That's,
Allegedly.
or let me say the same, allegedly, yes, money exchange terms. In fact, I remember when I was trying to secure admission in 2008. Yes, was it 2008 or 7? Then I went to TASUD. I remember vividly that the doctor I wanted to enter his office, like I wanted to go to on his door. There's this say no to third term, blah blah blah, like on his door. So which means that it was a major thing. Everybody was aware. It was
It was like
hitting the
basically an
polity.
open secret.
Open secret. It was hitting the polity as at that time, which means it was in the house. It was a debate in the house. I don't know, because I'm not very much versed with this thing then. Everybody knows that if the house should pass that bill, and it's killed through first reading, second reading, and he signs it, man, he's going to come back to say he wants to go for a fourth. Don't forget, he's doing it legally. So which means that he is still your democratically elected president, which I would still say, and that is what those Western people will say. You people, because your representatives are doing what you send them to do, so they are telling you that my Surulere House of Representative member is representing me and telling them that this is what Hafis wants. He wants the president to go for a third term,
Yes.
and is going to run. So if it had the assembly as at 07, then maybe probably we'll still have Obasanjo as our president today, because we will keep on moving, shifting. And so it is the backing of a part of the system of government that allows that president.
So basically, it's almost like, say, you follow the legal way to make sure that what you are doing is legitimate, even though it is in good conscience,
It's
it is not
legitimate.
right.
It's legitimate, so it will fly.
And there's this saying in philosophy that morality is subjective. What is morally right
It's
to one
subjective,
person
actually.
may not necessarily be. So
Might not be.
can we Yeah, can we say now that let's look at in Equatorial Guinea, Theodore Obiang Mbasogo has been there in power for 43 years.
44 years now.
44 years
44
now.
years now.
For
Yeah.
Biya, probably 41 years now.
Okay.
Sasu Nguesso, 38 years in DR Congo.
Yeah.
Yoweri Museveni, 36 or 37 years in Uganda. King Mwasti III, 36 years in Kingdom of
me
is civilian rule, because in my own opinion, as much as we can try to call these people democratic leaders because they run elections, like you see some cases where there will be an election in a country. I think it was in Zimbabwe a few years ago. Suddenly, the entire family of the man that was running against the president died, and before you know it, rather than him being declared the winner, the president now they brought about something, a power sharing formula, things like that. That's just an example. There have been cases where we've seen election fraud. We've seen people some of these leaders kill their opponents or make sure that even before you conceive the idea of running against them, they find a way to shut you down. And at the end of the day, they will claim that they are doing elections every 4 years or 6 years, or as it may be in their constitution. But you know that this is not really an election. And these Western powers see these things. For me, I feel like even the outcry against Niger and this military rule, for as far as ECOWAS and African Union is concerned, is basically just a show of shame and is hypocrisy, because you see these people that are ruling in the so-called democracy for 40 years, for 30-something years, you are not saying anything about it. Suddenly, military takes over and everybody says, no, we don't want. So my question now is perpetual civilian rule inherently better than or preferable to military rule?
Well, for me, in my own opinion, perpetual civilian rule, I detest
Because
it. And
I consider all this Museveni and co as perpetual civilian rule.
For me, I detest it, and I'm not in support of it. If it was perpetual military rule, if it was a military rule, or maybe a monarch, either constitutional or absolute, it's a different thing. But perpetual civilian rule, no. Not only you get no. For me, for me, it's a no for me, and this is my reason. You know, there's always this thing of two heads are better than one, or let's work as a team. In as much as I am still the one calling the shots. Okay, after everybody has sat down in the meeting, brought about different, whatever you people are going to do as a government, this is the truth about life. Whatever you are going to do, my take, my
opinion
instinct is superior to whatever you are bringing to the table. Except I'm not exercising my power. Maybe except I'm a figurehead. But in as much as I'm not a figurehead, I'm in control of the power. And whatever you bring to the table, whatever opinion, whatever, even if it's the most correct model in the world, you are a renowned economist, you are a renowned agriculturalist, you are bringing ideas to the table. It depends. So as a president, it will still come back to you, or after everybody have said, this is the best, they're giving you the manuscripts. You've taken home, you study, you say, okay, tomorrow you can just wake up and say, even if you are agreeing with everybody, you might not want to agree with one particular stuff because it doesn't work well, it doesn't sit well with your personal interest. So
also that they can think you're adding your own ingenuity into it. You just change something about it.
Thank you. So at the end of the day, if one person keeps ruling for a very long period of time, you people are subjected to the perception. That's the way I see it. So for me, it's a no way.
Dayo, what's your opinion on this? Because I feel like people, the moment people hear military rule, this, and that's the same reaction that we all even the Western world, It's all the sub-regional organizations, ECOWAS and co. That's the
Organization.
same
Mm.
perspective and opinion they have. And we have seen situations where the so-called civilian regimes have done more havoc than even some military regimes that have existed in Africa. So, what's your own opinion on this? Would you rather take military rule for a few years than one Mr. President ruling for 20 years?
So I think the proper definition for democracy in a layman's language is for the government for the people, by the people, and majorly it consists of the people. But when we look at the democracy that is being run in these countries that we made mention of, it is not being run by the people. So that is not like the proper definition. That's not like the proper definition of democracy. Their method of democracy there is like it is already been let me say altered already. It's not the proper definition of democracy that is being run in this country. And the people are beginning to feel like this thing is not working for us. We can't continue this way. And it led to the uproar of this coup that is happening in their country. Because how can somebody be ruling for 36 years and more? And these people still have, they are still in abject poverty. Some of them don't even have access to some basic amenities because these people in power still keep them in hostage. So it's just like we want a change, and for this change to happen, they need to make use of like the military power. That is why they had to use like force. Because let's take a closer look at it in these countries that this coup are happening. You will notice that the people, when we look at the news and everything, we will notice that these people are the citizens there. They are happy about it because they are tired already. How can somebody be ruling for 40 years and be making it a succession, passing it down to their children and
Children.
grandchildren?
That's even another angle to it. Some of them will rule and pass it to their children.
And pass it to their children. Like democracy shouldn't be that way. There should be transfer of power. There should be a free and fair election where people will make decisions. And but in these countries, because maybe because we are not in their country, but in these countries, that is not the way it is being run. So I would not accept that perpetual governance by the civilian. And indirectly also, I would not also want the military government. But I think for them to have a change of power, for them to have a change of system in that country, there has to be like an opera of that, like that military coup to make sure that these people are not still going to be ruling them for so long.
Um, Afis, one of the things that I know that we considered back then in school when we were studying politics, African politics and something, is we always look at the history of Africa and the traditional systems that we had in Africa, where the kingship, monarchy, and everything. And there's this argument or there's this perspective that it is that nature of African leadership before democracy came that is still ingrained in the minds of even the democratic leaders, which makes them feel like they are kings and they want to die in power. But we always keep talking about that traditional system. But if we now bring it home to, let's say, the Oyo traditional system, even when there was kings, the Alaafin and co, there was still the checks and balances with the Oyomesi, who could tell him, okay, you have overdone it, or you have done what you are not supposed to do. As powerful as the laughing is, the moment the Oyomesi turns their back on him, he has to leave the throne. So what that tells us is that even in the African traditional system, there was checks and balances. You were there for life, true, as a king, but then you were not assured of being there for life unless you are doing what is according to the will of the people. So,
Exactly.
do you buy this idea that we are used to this? As soon as I get power, this power hungry nature is connected to our history and heritage.
Okay. I would say Well, yes, but if we look at it, is from the historical perspective which you are bringing it from. Well, I'm not well versed with well, okay, let me just quickly paint one example everybody knows about. There was the advent of Ilorin, where the Balogun betrayed the Alafin then, and at the end of the day, it was betrayed. So my point is, at some point during those time, the king sometimes change his cabinet. Some king changes their cabinets, and they'll be like, the only thing they don't have power to change is the, what do we call them in Ijebu land? I've forgotten those people, those kingmakers.
Oshugbo.
Oshugbo, yeah, the kingmaker.
Yeah.
Those Oshugbo are their own business is not, maybe they are not concerned with the king is doing well, is not doing well. The Oshugbo are the ones that, okay, there's a king is coming up, let's take the king to the lady, let's do this. Now, when it comes to the cabinet members, the king has a say over them.
So he can change them if he feels like their thinking is not going according to his own interest.
Especially the Baloguns. The Baloguns used to be those people who could actually, who were actually strong, or who could actually challenge the king, not to the throne, but challenge the king to his authority. So that means they can say, okay, I'm living here, I'm going to somewhere else to start my own clan or to start my own community, whatever.
And the king, king knows the implication of that. That means the warrior of the town is leaving. The town becomes vulnerable.
Vulnerable, of course. Which was the issue of Oyo and the Ilorins, Afonja. Also, this now takes us back to the point I made, or I laid emphasis on from the start, that if you have a cabinet, or not even the president cabinet, like the people who are supposed to be the checks and balance, that are also in support of that king, or they are in support of that president, then nothing is going to change. So now the issue here is there is a constitution, and there's a constitution that guides you on how to rule, what you can do, what you cannot do. So the moment the president or the head of government, head of state, head of parliament, whatever title they are holding, start to deviate from that this thing, then we can liken them to the former kings, because those kings then, there's no constitution. No.
Yeah.
The only thing is just that
at the very least, it was not written.
It was not written. Let's just put it that way. It was not written, but there's always nothing guiding them to say this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do. Those days now, you used to hear of Oban Gbese le Obirin, Oban Shekiniko Kiniko. There's this adage of Oba Balori Ungboboni, that is, the king is superior to everything that is in his land. But it's not the same of today. That is why I would not liken the system of before to the system of today. So, which still buttress my points of, once the president knows how to finger or tangle or maneuver the constitution, and is still dancing to his tune, then
so I guess what it essentially means, as long as the ruling class are in support of what the president is doing, and they are willing to bend the rules for his sake, then everything goes. Dayo, from your own perspective, if we bring it home a bit to Nigeria, okay, thank God, whether or not, because I remember one interview that they had with Obasanjo. He said if he wanted third time, he would have gotten it. And I'm sure he made that statement to kind of distort history a little bit, because what you don't know for sure, the more doubt that you see that is put on it, the more it becomes even shrouded, and you start asking yourself, did you really do this? Because time has passed. So he made that statement, and then thank God, whether he wanted it or not, he did not have it. Thank God, the Jonathan, if after he lost the election, decided to do the right thing to hand over. Thank God, Major General Buhari
Handed over.
handed over power, even though it was to
President Buhari for correction's sake. It's
okay.
President Buhari.
No, I intentionally said that because
I know, I know, I know
his
you were laughing.
yeah
Major
his
General Buhari.
military background, you think maybe
Mm.
him too you want to say, okay, let me see who will dare me to come and take the power. Do you think that our democracy is safe, Dayo, from these kind of things that we see on one part, not even from the military now, or at least from perpetual civilian rule? Have we been able to, at least from this historical precedents, from Obasanjo up to now, have we been able to secure enough longevity and succession that we can go and sleep at night and say, no matter what, one president cannot do more than 8 years?
I think that Obasanjo gave us an eye opener
Mm.
with that statement he made then. And after him, and for the previous years of ruling in Nigeria, I think there has been successful transfer of power within the presidents. So I think there are still flaws that can be opened up by an intellectual president, by somebody that can look through those loopholes. But we are not yet looking into another news for me. I would say Nigeria has been a very, very enlightened country, and for a situation like that to happen, I'm not sure Nigeria can engage in such kind of governance by allowing somebody to rule over for a long time. I'm not really sure about that.
One would hope that we have grown enough politically to
Yeah,
be able to.
politically, because it hasn't happened
Actually, I
yet.
would say we have outgrown some stuffs, some just let me say funny stuffs that are happening in some other parts of
Exactly.
Africa. There are some bills that are recently passed in the, let me say 3 5 years in Nigeria that's actually had made people relax. That is the journalists, the political activists, and the likes. That okay, since we have this, okay, we can still move on, we can still move forward, still getting better. Example is the Freedom of Information Act. Not too young to run bill, all of this kind of all of this kind of bill and acts to give us assurance. Not only that people are more enlightened now, it is more open for participation. So it only takes a radical major general or lieutenant colonel or colonel. It only take it that will say, all of you, I'm going to kill you today, and I'm going to assume you in the position of the president. But for you to do it in this our own democracy of today, you
It's going to
might
be very
find your
difficult.
way through hook and crook and say, okay, I want to bypass this, bypass that, as the president do. But you can't. We have laws now that limits you, or that limits the power you can exercise in saying, okay, I just want to continue this, I just want to continue that.
On a final note, what I would now ask is, at this point in Africa, that we know that, okay, perpetual democratic rule is not ideal. And then at the same time, we also know that military rule, of course, is not the ideal situation. Is there anything that the African regional bodies, for instance, the ECOWAS, the African Union, should be doing that will not make them look like hypocrites in the face of the military? Because that is essentially what the guys in Niger called ECOWAS, hypocrites. And then they cited examples of the poverty in the country and then the perpetual rule in some other regions. What exactly do you think, in your opinion, they can do right now to challenge those perpetual civilian rules, even though we know that according to how they have been able to manipulate their constitution, the law in their countries allow them to stay that long?
Okay. I was just a little bit concerned about the first question you asked me, because I think for a perpetual rule of a civilian to happen in Nigeria, I'm not sure it will actually just take just the cabinet alone. It will actually have to take along the military people too, because if you're going to put in consideration what happened in Nigeria in 2020, in Lagos State especially, where the citizens were protesting for a good governance, and the military had to intervene and cause havoc. Because I'm thinking now that for this thing to happen, it will not just take just the democratic rule for Nigeria, because Nigeria, as I've said earlier, is an enlightened country. It will actually have to take along the military government. And I think in Nigeria, I'm not so sure if I'm correct though, but I think the democratic government has presided over the military.
Have
The military is already in their corner.
control.
Yeah, they have control over them. So
Yeah.
for maybe for the incumbent president to say, okay, I want to extend my tenure for more than the usual, it will take more than just the democratic people. It will also carry along the military people. And
Okay.
now back to the question that you asked me now.
Yeah.
In all sincerity, I would say ECOWAS and other foreign bodies too, they are being hypocritical in this situation, because they've been looking along when these people, their president has been ruling for 36 years and more.
And
They
they've kept
didn't
quiet.
say anything, and they kept quiet. And the foreign bodies too were also looking. They did. That means indirectly it is also servicing their interest.
Mm.
You understand? So
So
they've been
it's basically a game
hypocritical.
of interest.
It's a game of interest for them, because they are actually like a body presiding over the affairs of these countries within their jurisdiction.
Mhm.
They are supposed to like profile a solution to the people, because we say democracy is the government of the people. They're
Yeah.
supposed to like profile a solution to the people by providing a law that will govern over their democratic decisions, by making sure that there's a successful handing over of government in their country. So them just looking over for these past years has been hypocritical, and now because the citizens are saying we want a change, and they had to make a radical decision, they are now saying this is not right, this is not, it's not so
Suddenly they are
appropriate.
interested in the. So okay, Afis, based on what Dayo said now, naturally would assume that it's almost impossible for an external body to come and challenge the supremacy or sovereignty of a government within its region. But then ECOWAS
Mm,
has shown that it is capable of at least attempting to. So
exactly.
in a democracy, for instance, there's this one of the iron laws of democracy is that democracies don't go to war against each other. Do you think
Mm,
it's possible in practical terms for African Union to make a treaty that, what, every democratic country in this African Union, if you want to participate as an African Union country, it doesn't matter if you're in the African continent, but you want to be a member of African Union, you must modify your constitution to say, okay, the same way, for instance, the United Nations said every country must ratify human rights into their constitution. Can the African Union, in practical terms, say every African country must ratify two-term maximum of 4 years into their constitution? Do you think it is realistic?
Well, it is actually not realistic because of the situation of Africa. It is not one size fits all for Africa, because most of Africa's democracy, it's still young. Most of, in fact, the countries that has stable democratic rule for a while, for example, Mauritius, Botswana, and the likes, Namibia, it is they are still young. There's no place. Okay, most African countries got independence around 60s, within 50s and the 60s. Let's just say within 56 and so, and all of these African countries have actually gone, and the civil war or the strife for power still transcends or cascade down to what is still happening today, which means that there's still no particular stability in the transition of power. in most places in Africa.
They have
So
not
which still,
matured enough for that
it
level.
is not matured enough. Given what I just said, you will still see it in the fabrics of Africa. For example, Sudan, South Sudan and Sudan. What year did they still and it is still the thirst for power that makes them
Mm.
say, okay, you go as Sudan, me I'll go as South Sudan.
Yeah.
Do you get? So that's one. Then if you go to Ethiopia that's supposed to be the African Union, I think some years ago, still have this torso too, and it is for power, if I'm not mistaken. So given all of these facts, you find discrepancies across Africa when it comes to governance. Don't let me say democracy, because just like we said, democracy is not the usual democracy that's supposed to be practiced. So what AU can still do now is to monitor or to make sure that, okay, in this country, human development index is still fine. In this country, people's rights have not been trampled upon. In this country, like specific case for specific countries. If AU wants to do a one size fits all, or something like the EU has, or the North America has, then you will just find it that the treaty is just there in black and white, and it is not holding any water. It is not.
Any water.
For example, if you go to Congo, you find out that human rights are being trampled upon on a large scale.
Hmm.
On a large scale. And how would you say they are practicing a democracy, or they have a treaty they've signed to and they are adhering to, when that kind of thing is still happening? Just like you said, one of the major underpinning of democracy, and they are not adhering to that
Made by
underpinning.
African Union.
So that means we can't have it is still not, at the least, let all of these people that have been there for decades, let them first
Let
remove
them
all of
leave
them.
first.
For beer that cannot work very well, all of them, then you can start to say, okay, we want to introduce that kind of it.
So a point that you made about maybe a country that is still young, like for instance, America, even though they were not so young during the Second World War, there was a time that Theodore Roosevelt, during that period, he did a third term because they were in the middle of war. They believed that it was not a good time to conduct elections. So I agree with your point that in some instances you find situations where democratic transition may not be possible because the democracy is still very young, and they might even be they've not even gotten matured enough to be able to get things right. And you see a president being there for a little bit longer than what we would expect. All in all, I feel like as far as military rule is concerned, as far as perpetual civilian rule is concerned, the major thing that bothers us all about it is human rights and true representation in governance. We want a situation where the people that are in government are the people that we put there, not people that took it by force, and not people that even after we put them there, they've now decided to stay by force, which is the case in some civilian rules. Whether we talk about military taking over power across Africa, or we talk about presidents overstaying their welcome in power. One thing that we can at least be happy for in Nigeria is that we are not experiencing those kind of things. Although we have our own issues, we have our own cracks in our own political system. But at the same time, we've had it better, a lot better. The
It's a
only thing I would
privilege.
say, yeah, the only thing I would say is that for us, maybe it's the same ruling class that we are recycling. But at the very least, we are seeing a different face each time. And we are seeing different perspectives. No matter how much the ruling class may be the same, the fact that it is somebody else that is rotating into power, it gives us a little bit of hope. And then maybe one day our democracy will be matured enough that a Showore will become president out of nowhere, or a random person can just say, I want to be president, and that's it. But even in the most developed
And
democracies,
thank you, Tommy. Sorry to cut you short. For where you've just got into now, and we are getting there actually. If you look at the trend that has been coming before now and what has been happening, even Buhari, that he's sorry to say, a tyrant Democrat. Buhari will know the year with everybody. He still put some things in place that would, okay, look at the electoral reform. One, look at the young, not too young. The point here is that we are progressing in terms of putting the feet of our democracy in the soil of this country. So we are progressing. We are not actually retrogressing. You can wake up tomorrow now and say you want to become the president. What we just have to do is have a robust institution whereby the system can work for itself. Like we should institutionalize our processes. So that, and I know we are going to get there.
Okay, so I think that sums it, your point sums it up, Hafis. We should be proud of what we have in Nigeria. We should appreciate our democracy. We should allow it to grow. Countries like America, I think their current president is like the 46th president. What that tells you is that they've had, if all the presidents did just one term, which is not true, if all the presidents did just one term, that you now multiply, that's 4 years times 46 people. That's a long time. In the entire history of Nigeria, I don't think we have had that. Even if we had military rule to it, we've not had enough government to match the kind of democracy they've had in America. So we don't expect to just wake up one day and suddenly we can vote over the internet or something. and even in places like America where the politics or the democracy is developed, a black person became president. But hey, he didn't just wake up out of nothing and say he wants to be president. He went through the system. He was a senator. He did his due diligence. He followed the party line. He must have kissed some people's feet and had to smile at people that he liked or he didn't like. At the end of the day, he found his way there. Politics is a dirty game. Democracy requires nurturing. People that don't understand this are the ignorant people that would say because they lost the election, they want military to come and take over. Every single year that we spend in a democratic government is development, is positive, and it is also helping us get to that level that we want to get to. And eventually, we will get to our democracy will become mature. So I agree with you guys that let us enjoy what we have, not just while it lasts, because we hope it lasts forever, and let us appreciate it. So we've come to the end of this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we on the podcast did, and we hope that you like our podcast and you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also share it to people who you feel like our words would inspire. I remain your boy Adeboy, and I'm signing out with Dayo and Hafis. Till next time.